Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Jo Becker. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Children's Rights Division at Human Rights Watch. I'm also the chair of the advisory board for the Watchlist on Children and Armed Conflict. And I'm very pleased to introduce the panel this morning to release a new report from the Watchlist on Armed Conflict on the impact of the conflict in Northeast Nigeria on children. For those of you who are not familiar with the Watchlist on Children in Armed Conflict, we're a network of international NGOs striving to protect children in war zones. Together with our local and international partners, we strategically collect and disseminate information on violence against children throughout the world, and we use this information to advocate for change. So until the mass abduction of over 200 schoolgirls from a school in Chibok, Borno, earlier this year, very little was understood about the conflict in northeast Nigeria or its impact on children. The report that we're releasing today gives a comprehensive description of how the warring parties in northeastern Nigeria have subjected boys and girls not only to abductions, but to forced recruitment, to detention, attacks at school, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. Before I introduce the panel, I want to share just a little bit about the methodology behind this report. Janine Morna, sitting in the center there, is a researcher for the Watchlist on Children in Armed Conflict. She spent 6 weeks in Nigeria between March and May of this year to document the violations perpetuated on children and to provide recommendations on how to protect children in this area. During the course of her research, she interviewed 156 people, including 54 internally displaced persons and refugees who had fled from Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states, which are the 3 emergency states. The interviews that she conducted included girls and boys between the ages of 11 and 16 who were direct victims of violations. She also talked to families of children affected by the conflict and people who personally witnessed violations against children during attacks by the warring parties. We also interviewed state and federal government representatives, members of the military, police, humanitarian agencies, and NGOs. So today you're going to hear the findings from the research as well as initiatives to address the abuses in the Northeast, such as the Bring Back Our Girls movement and the Safe Schools initiative. So now I'm very pleased to introduce the panel. Sitting in the middle is Ms. Janine Morna. As I mentioned, she's a research officer at the Watchlist, and she will discuss the findings and the recommendations from the report. To my immediate left is Saudatu Mahdi. She is the Secretary General of the Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative and a member of the Nigeria National Human Rights Commission Governing Council. She's also one of the leaders of the Bring Back Our Girls movement, and she's going to address the impact of the conflict on women and girls and how the Bring Back Our Girls campaign is working to ensure the safe return of the over 200 girls who are still missing from Chibok, Borno State. And finally, we're pleased to welcome Mr. Justin Van Fleet on my far left, Chief of Staff to the Right Honourable Gordon Brown in the Office of the UN Special Envoy for Global Education. He's also a representative of the Safe Schools initiative, and he will discuss how the conflict has affected education in the Northeast and how the Safe Schools initiative is hoping to address some of these challenges. They'll each speak briefly, and then, of course, we'll have time to take your questions. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Since 2009, the level of violence and the scale of violations against children in northeastern Nigeria have worsened. The conflict has displaced about 650,000 people, primarily women and children, and affected millions of others. Of particular concern to Watchlist is the recruitment and use of children by Jama'atu al-Sunnah Lidawati wal-Jihad, commonly known as Boko Haram, as well as armed self-defense militia who operate in the northeast. These children carry out surveillance and sometimes participate in attacks. Children are increasingly in the line of fire. Interviewees told Watchlist that they had seen children as young as 14 years old working alongside Boko Haram to carry ammunition, set houses alight. They had also seen children as young as 13 years old among civilian self-defense militia. Boko Haram abducts boys and girls, and in particular, forces boys to join their ranks or face death. Sometimes the group pressures families to have their children join Boko Haram, and in one case documented by Watchlist, a 13-year-old who refused to join had 2 of his family members killed. In other cases, the group incentivizes disaffected, unemployed youth in Borno State and other areas of the Northeast to join for money. In recent months, there's been a disturbing uptick in the participation of girls in attacks by Boko Haram. A young woman formerly abducted by the group told Watchlist of how she was made to raid hospitals during attacks, carry ammunition, and in one case even slaughter somebody who had been brought back to the camp. In July this year, reports emerged of a 10-year-old girl who had been detained by authorities and was suspected to be acting under the direction of Boko Haram. The rise in the recruitment and use of children by civilian self-defense militia is also worrying and often not discussed. Civilian self-defense forces have increased in the Northeast due to several security gaps. The most notorious of these groups is the Civilian Joint Task Force, or JTF, otherwise known as the Young Gora, which was formed in Borno state capital of Maiduguri to assist Nigerian security forces. The term civilian JTF is often used quite broadly and encompasses a number of self-defense militias operating in the Northeast. The civilian JTF has received praise from the president and support from the military and the Borno state government. The civilian JTF employs a variety of tactics to recruit children. While the group has female members, it primarily targets teenage boys and men for recruitment. Initially, new recruits joined to avenge the deaths of family members who had been killed at the hand of Boko Haram. However, the group has come under increasing fire. As the group has come under increasing fire from Boko Haram, villagers have described a process of recruitment where representatives from the civilian self-defense militia negotiate with chiefs of different villages for new members. This includes any able-bodied member and children as young as 13 years old. One youth told Watchlist, "If you refuse to join, you are killed." Parents complained of having to hide their sons when militia representatives arrived in the towns to avoid recruitment. Once recruited, children are used for a variety of activities, as I mentioned before, carrying out patrols, gathering surveillance, and also participating in attacks. The forced nature of recruitment demands that children be treated as victims. Unfortunately, the government's current policy of addressing children encountered during conflict is to detain them, oftentimes incommunicado, in unofficial military detention facilities that have reportedly mistreated detainees. Sometimes the detention happens as a result of raids on Boko Haram camps. Other times, it happens during large sweeps where civilians are arrested by Nigerian security forces and civilian self-defense militia under suspicion of being involved with Boko Haram. Children in particular are thought to work as spies for the group. Other violations investigated by Watchlist include attacks on schools by Boko Haram, which will be addressed in greater detail further in the briefing. Until mid-2013, Boko Haram's reported targets primarily involved burning schools or empty buildings at night. However, as the counteroffensive in the Northeast has increased, attacks on schools and civilians have become increasingly frequent and destructive. Several major attacks have occurred just this last year. According to a Watchlist media survey since 2012, Boko Haram and possibly other groups have carried out attacks on schools, including places of higher education, that have resulted in the death, injury, and abduction of at least 414 students, teachers, or civilians on school premises. This, of course, is just a very brief underestimate, obviously, because it's based on reports that have been provided in the media. In addition to attacks, Boko Haram also threatens and intimidates teachers and students from going to school. The impact on education has been far-reaching. Watchlist spoke to 22 interviewees who said their communities had proactively closed secular schools from as early as April 2013 because they felt they could not operate them safely. In March 2014, the Borno state government closed primary, junior secondary, and senior secondary schools, and the Borno State Ministry of Education recently announced that over 250,000 school-aged children are out of school. Finally, Watchlist investigated abductions by Boko Haram. Both boys and girls are abducted by the group. The strategy of abducting girls began in early 2013 in what appears to be a response by Boko Haram to the arrest of more than 100 women and children, including the leaders' wives, by security forces in 2012. Watchlist interviewed women and girls between the ages of 15 and 22, as well as several people from the states of emergency who had witnessed abductions. The incidents took place between December 2012 and continued on post-Chibok. We found that abductions occur in a variety of settings. Since the abduction at Chibok, many people are now aware of abductions that take place from schools. What some may not know is that this practice had actually preceded the Chibok incident. A former abductee, for example, told Watchlist how at age 16, her and 5 of her classmates were captured by suspected members of Boko Haram in their school in Borno State, and forced to marry members of Boko Haram in December 2012. Other abductions have taken place from local public transportation. One abductee, a young woman who was about 21 years old at the time of her abduction, spoke of how Boko Haram pulled her as well as several other buses and took many of the passengers captive. Sometimes women and girls have been taken during raids on their villages, and that trend continues post-Chibok. In June 2014, reports emerged of Boko Haram abducting scores of women from villages across Borno State. 63 of these women and girls successfully escaped in July 2014. Oftentimes, Christian women and girls are forced to convert under threats and torture and coerced into marriage with other abductees. One abductee spoke of how she was dragged around a camp with a noose around her neck until she agreed to finally convert. Women and girls in these camps are sometimes raped. Sometimes the violence appears targeted, with specific girls being selected for rape. Other times, the attacks seem opportunistic, with members taking advantage of young women and girls when commanding officers are away. Women and girls who escape lack sufficient support, counseling, and health services when they return. Many have to leave their homes for their safety. Few of the women and girls reported their abduction because they mistrusted the authorities, they feared retaliation from the group, and they felt that because of the overwhelming number of these cases, it was futile and that there wasn't the opportunity to investigate, to provide individual assistance. Despite strong legislative provisions and some humanitarian initiatives to assist survivors, there are still several gaps. There is limited humanitarian data on what takes place in the Northeast, and only a handful of international organizations currently have a presence there, leaving local NGOs and national agencies, often with limited capacity, to lead the humanitarian response. Hundreds of thousands of displaced people are largely invisible to key authorities and often seek refuge and support from overextended host communities. Moreover, the lack of expertise on managing children in conflicts is hindering the response. Systems for monitoring and programming are still limited. I'm going to end with 4 key recommendations for actors here today to address violations against children. The first is to take action on the recruitment and use of children, an issue that we still feel is underreported and under address. The government of Nigeria, with the support of child protection actors, should denounce the recruitment of children by all armed groups, take immediate steps to release child soldiers in custody, and develop procedures to transfer child soldiers to civilian actors. The second is to strengthen data collection on violations in the Northeast to allow for future accountability. This involves carrying out assessments on violations against children and implementing systems for monitoring and investigating abuses. The third is around strengthening humanitarian capacity to address violations. This includes deploying or recruiting experts with expertise in conflict-related issues and training relevant stakeholders and embedding these individuals in national and emergency institutions. International actors should take steps to engage more in the Northeast and to scale up the capacity of NGO partners operating in those areas. Finally, we would like to promote the increased initiatives for school safety and security. This includes supporting the Safe Schools Initiative by assisting them with funding and securing implementation of their programs to ensure further support for out-of-school learners and improving school security. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Saudatu Mahdi, Secretary General of WRAPA and a representative of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign in Nigeria. I want to start the briefing with a mathematical statement. Today is September 4th, since 276 girls were abducted from Chibok in northeast Nigeria. 57 of those girls escaped of their own volition. 219 are still in captivity. 0 number has been rescued. Since the abduction, today again is 143 days since these girls have been in captivity. The Bring Back Our Girls campaign has been on for 128 days. And it is 103 days since the government of Nigeria said it knows where these girls are. And as I speak, none of them has been brought back. Sadly, too, and we don't pray so, by September 11th, a very, very important date for the world in terms of insurgency, these girls will be 150 days in captivity. Why the Bring Back Our Girls campaign? Organizations such as mine, WRAPA, and other women's rights groups find the abduction very, very critical to our work. It has hindered our capacity and our ability to upscale our advocacy for girl-child education in Nigeria. 10 million children in Nigeria are out of school. Of this number, about 60% are girls in rural communities as well as in urban communities. This is sad because with the situation, it will be very difficult to imagine how parents can, how hope and confidence can be restored in parents to allow girls to go. The implication of that, obviously, on the lives of the girls and especially women who would be the same girls who are in captivity and other girls who would be denied the right of education would be jeopardized. It is also the conviction of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign that we have a legitimate cause to ask the government of Nigeria to rescue and bring back these girls alive. We believe it is a primary responsibility, fundamental responsibility, and we are in order asking that, and we are happy that the whole world recognizes this and supports the Bring Back Our Girls campaign in that call to have government respond to our campaign. What have we done? We have constructively engaged with government since 30th April 2014. We have had the engagement with the National Assembly, with the Office of the Chief of Defense Staff, with the Inspector General of Police, with all the major media outlets in Nigeria. We have engaged the Office of the National Security Advisor. So in effect, the Bring Back Our Girls campaign is a constructive contribution of citizens, ordinary citizens, represented by the 4 women who started the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. It is not an opposition, it is not a political matter. We are wary of the trend in which our campaign has been defined as opposition, and we remain resolute in continuing the call for the government to rescue the girls and bring them back safe and alive. We have been demanding, and we remain resolute also in asking the international community to place pressure on the Nigerian government and compel the right action to bring back the 219 girls still in custody, as well as confront insurgency as a real threat to our development and our unity as a nation. We hope that the report released by Watchlist, which WRAPA and the Bring Back Our Girls campaign affirms as a situation that is existing in Nigeria, is also responded to positively by our government and all operators in the Nigerian development space. We pray that we will not see day 150, which would be another sad point in the history of the world in terms of terrorism. We hope that the international community will work and continue to put in energy and pressure, as well as support victims of insurgency, particularly women and girls. There is a strong need for reconstruction and rehabilitation, but most importantly, we believe the education of these girls in safe school environments. We believe that the protection of these girls in safe schools where infrastructure is available, parameters are defined, girls are confident that they are safe leaving their homes and reaching school and studying in safe environments. We want to thank everyone and to ask you to please amplify the demand of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, that the Nigerian government must keep it as a priority to rescue these girls and to confront insurgency. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. First of all, we'd like to congratulate Watchlist on this important report that they've produced, as well as the Bring Back Our Girls campaign on the ongoing efforts in Nigeria and globally to raise attention of the plight of the girls of Chibok and the importance of education for all girls. From the perspective of the UN Special Envoy for Global Education, our main objective and goal is to ensure that no efforts are spared in the lead up to the end of the 2015 Millennium Development Goals, and ensure that every child has the right to go to school and learn. And we're currently 58 million children away from reaching our target by the end of next year. One of our primary countries of partnership has been Nigeria, given the fact that Nigeria has 10.5 million out-of-school children, which is the largest number of out-of-school children in the world, almost 1/5 of the total global out-of-school population. And if we look at the situation in northern Nigeria, that's where 60% of the out-of-school population is. The number of children is 30 times greater in the north than it is in some of the states in the southern part of the country. In the north, there are 3 boys in school for every single girl that's in school. So we've been working very closely with the government of Nigeria, the finance minister, the education minister, to develop plans for delivery and financing of education and develop incentive mechanisms for parents to send their children to school and create safe learning environments. In the wake of what happened, the unfortunate tragedy in Chibok, we've been working extremely closely with the government and with grassroots organizations and international partners on the Safe Schools Initiative, which was launched on May 7th in Nigeria, in Abuja, at the World Economic Forum. We wanted to make sure that we are doing something to look at the safety of schools in the north, particularly those that are coming under attack in the recent attacks on schools from Boko Haram and other groups. And we've consulted with a wide variety of partners, both NGOs, UN agencies, organizations working in other countries across the globe, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Somalia, to see what is working and what is being done to ensure that schools are being protected from attack and that safety mechanisms are in place. After consulting with these different organizations, we've worked in partnership with the Award at School campaign and with the Global Business Coalition for Education to develop an outline of a Safe Schools Initiative program, which was then taken to a set of Nigerian business leaders who are part of the Global Business Coalition for Education. That group of business leaders initially put in $10 million to support a Safe Schools Initiative fund, which was launched in Nigeria, as I said, on May 7th. And then the government came in, and President Jonathan and the finance minister also matched those efforts with an additional contribution of $10 million into the Safe Schools Initiative. We've since seen contributions come in from the UK government, the Norwegian government, and several others have expressed interest as well. To date, the Safe Schools Initiative is based out of the government of Nigeria. There's a steering committee that's been set up that brings together NGO and civil society partners alongside UN agencies and government agencies as well. We're also in the process of setting up a multi-donor trust fund at the United Nations that could also channel co-financing to the Safe Schools Initiative, which should be set up in the coming weeks. And the initiatives really focus on both school-based interventions as well as community-based interventions that can establish some general protections for school from attack, but also start to promote cultural and community values that can help create a sense of importance of school and also put in safety mechanisms should schools come under attack. So from school-based interventions, it's things that are focused on basic infrastructure, walls in schools, lighting, roofs, fireproofing of schools, things of the different materials used in construction, all the way to engaging community leaders. So if they're in support of girls' education, speaking out about girls' education in local communities, engaging civil society partners in that process, setting up school boards that involve parents, teachers, and communities so that there can be early warning systems if schools should become under threat of attack, and then also putting in place response plans should something unfortunate happen so that there's a way that communities are able to work with authorities to ensure that children are protected and can go to school safely. So again, we're in the early days of the initiative. It's at the point where we have, again, the initial contribution from the business community matched by the government, and several donors are coming on board. We're in the process of setting up the trust fund and also setting up a series of initial projects to go to the steering committee that will be launched in the coming weeks to start to roll out some of these efforts to help protect schools and education from attack. Again, we're working very closely with civil society partners on the ground, especially the Bring Back Our Girls campaign and others in the UN agencies and NGO community. And we also welcome, again, the findings from this report. It's very important to be able to document and start to move towards some of these global recommendations that international organizations, agencies, and also national governments can take to help protect children and ensure that all children can go to school. Thank you.
Thanks for those presentations. We have another press conference starting here at 11:15, but we certainly have at least 10 minutes for questions. So please identify yourself and also say if you have a particular panelist you want to address your question.
Evelyn Leopold, and I welcome you on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. And I'm wondering, how do you have safe schools when Boko Haram is running around and the government seems unable to stop them? And do the militias who are combating Boko Haram, do they also rape girls and women or force them to marry them, which is another word for rape? And I imagine it's not just Christian communities, as Chibok was. It's Muslim communities too, which is the majority there. And are the imams taking a public stand about this distortion of Islam?
I can start on just how do you protect, and then turn over to you for the more specifics. I mean, I think that it's a process. It's not something that can happen overnight. And what we're trying to do through the Safe Schools Initiative is put in some basic systems and start to change community norms and make it okay for people to speak out in favor of girls' education and engaging religious leaders in those conversations so they can start to make others feel safe, that it's okay for parents to send their children to school, and that if something should happen, that there are response mechanisms in place, and that all efforts are being taken to ensure that there are, with all reasonable efforts are being taken to ensure that children can go to school safely. And again, I'd point to some of the efforts that have been taken in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nepal, which were in very similar situations. Afghanistan's one that's been particularly successful in terms of enrollment of girls into school over the past several years, where they're in similar situations with schools being under attack, and the engagement of the community leaders, and also in concert with other interventions, both on infrastructure and community-based organizations, have actually made great gains, and we're hoping we can replicate that in Nigeria.
And perhaps I'll just very briefly speak to your question regarding civilian self-defense militia that operate in the Northeast. We weren't able to document other abuses by these groups, although there have definitely been reports of other abuses committed by them. But I will say I think one of the concerns about the way in which they operate is they don't currently report to any authority, and I think that makes it very difficult to hold them accountable. Oftentimes they are sort of led by community leaders and so forth, and that I think means that they can often act without, standard operating procedures, and I think that would definitely raise some concerns. Thank you.
And on the question whether the Muslim clerics have condemned, ever since the advent of the Boko Haram insurgency, religious leaders, both Christians and Muslims, and especially in recent past, the Muslim community led by the Sultan of Sokoto have condemned and called for the Boko Haram to stop denigrating the religion of Islam, and have said that what they are doing has nothing to do with Islam. So there is a clear stand against Boko Haram, posing as an Islamic activity.
Let's take 3 questions in succession and then turn back to the panel.
Thank you. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. This is a question about the Nigerian government's apparent inaction in rescuing the girls and in actually addressing this issue. And I wonder if you could tell us why this is happening. Why is there this inaction? Is it institutional? Is it the failure of the military? Is it the failure of the government? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. George Baumgarten, correspondent for some East African newspapers, Nation Media Group. I'd like to ask if any of you, if I may, you threw out 2 facts, which are that the federal government or the local governments in Borno have closed a certain number of schools, and you threw out the statistic that there were 10 million children in Nigeria out of school. I'd like to ask you, if I may, Does that mean they have at least for the moment given up on providing education for those children? And that 10 million students, if memory serves me, the total population of Nigeria is 100 million. What is the total population of school-age children? Therefore, what percentage does the 10 million represent? And also to the lady from Bring Back Our Girls, from AWAPA, I think I've got that right. The 57 girls who escaped, have they been debriefed in some fashion, and have they called in people who are serious experts from somewhere in the world on PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in order to administer to their debriefing, to their psychological recovery? Thank you.
Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for the briefing. I'm noticing in your recommendations to the Secretary General the idea of encouraging investigation into grave violations by civilian groups and by the Nigerian security forces. So acknowledging, obviously, that Boko Haram is, a very bad group. What about the security forces? I know that Watchlist, in the case of the DRC Army, recommended that they not be incorporated into the MINUSCA and Central African Republic. Do you think that the UN should look carefully at the continued or use its leverage about peacekeeping? And also, do you have any follow-up on the UN saying that the DRC Army will, in fact, serve in MINUSCA? I'd like to, if you could, speak to that. Thanks.
Janine, do you want to start?
Sure. I think it might be most appropriate if I start with your question, and then and I'll sort of touch on where I can on the other ones. But yeah, during our research, there definitely was a lot of allusion to abuses by the security forces. But because that wasn't something we couldn't independently verify, it's not a huge focus in the report. We really focus on more on the detention aspect, the detention of children who have been recruited by security forces, as that was something we were able to document. But I think one of the reasons we are asking for increased scrutiny is because there was some discussion of that happening. And if we're going to be investigating actors, I think, in the Northeast, I think we have to do it impartially and objectively, and that requires looking at the behavior of all of the actors in the Northeast. I think one of the things we're hoping is, at least through this report, there'll be increased scrutiny of civilian self-defense militia, which oftentimes work very closely in collaboration with the security forces, and I think that also warrants closer scrutiny. In regards to your point about MINUSCA, I'm not sure. I'd have to check with my colleagues, and I'd be happy to follow up with you. But as far as I know, there hasn't been any deliberate response or action from the UN in response to that, and I'd have to confirm. So I wouldn't be able to.
Sure. Babacar Guy said, I asked him at the stakeout whether they will participate, and at least until January they will participate. Okay. Has been the answer.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So there we have it. And then I guess I think. Regarding, I think the other questions might be more appropriately addressed by the group, but I'm happy to jump in if, yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
I think I will take up the question on what the debrief of the 57 girls who have escaped. Yes, there have been concerted efforts, both by the federal and state governments, to support these girls. There have been victim support initiatives that are ongoing. There's one in Maiduguri, which is responding to the needs of the girls. There are also independent initiatives that are working to support the girls. I know for sure that some of them are not in that community. They have left the community. But for those who have remained in the community, there is this support being extended. However, we call that these initiatives need to be coordinated and consolidated into something that is accessible and affordable to these girls. Affordability in the sense that some of the locations or some of the structures and mechanisms may not be quickly, or rather, in a position that the girls and their families can. Not just the Chibok girls, but every community member in the Northeast needs this. So we need to see it on a large scale, scaled up and consolidated. In terms of the issue of the 10 million children out of school, the Gender in Nigeria report of 2012 estimates that with the DFID projects on Engine, there will be definitely a need to scale up efforts to get the children who are out of school back in school. But this is not to say that we are comfortable, or rather we are satisfied. The need for specified action to address out-of-school children in the North, and particularly in the Northeast, is very, very urgent. And we would like, as part of the support that Nigeria gets or puts together, this is a priority. Thank you.
And I think I'm best placed to go into the question about the out-of-school population and what that is in terms of the in-school population, those demographics and reasons. So as you mentioned, there are 10.5 million children out of school, and that's primary school in Nigeria. And there are 20 million children enrolled in school. So it's about a third of the school-age population, give or take, is currently out of school. Again, predominantly in the northern states, but not exclusively to the north. The main reasons are typical reasons that we see across many countries with large out-of-school populations, mainly poverty and opportunity cost for children to be doing other things aside from going to school, the availability of a teacher, a school or facility, or a quality learning environment, and other factors, discrimination against girls, early forced marriage also are some of the gender-based aspects at play in this. As you know, in Nigeria, the education is provided by the state and under state provision, but we're working very closely with the federal government and with some of the states in terms of how we can set up incentive mechanisms that can work to actually help incentivize the enrollment of children in the school that are out of school, particularly girls. One particular strategy that we're looking at very seriously is the provision of conditional cash transfers targeting specific populations that would in fact give families a small stipend if they chose to send their children, particularly girls, to school as opposed to keeping them out of school. So that's one of the particular interventions. We've had a report that came out about 1.5 years ago where we looked at an assessment of 2 or 3 different interventions that could take place. And I think we estimated in the North we get 900,000 girls into school by a simple CCT program. Which is one of the strategies, and that sort of was looking at what other CCT programs have achieved, and that's sort of the best guess of what that could achieve if we rolled out a program like that in some of those states.
Just following up briefly, if I may. Do I understand correctly that Nigerian parents have a legal right to keep their children out of school? I mean, I'm an American. In this country, if you don't send your child to public school or private school or have some kind of approved homeschooling, they send truant officers after you to take the children to school or force the children to go to school. Is this inconceivable in Nigeria under law? Are parents really allowed to do this?
I think part of, and maybe you're even best placed to answer this question.
There is no legal right to keep a child out of school. Every Nigerian child is entitled to education as a right and a responsibility of government. What we have is extraneous factors such as poverty, ignorance, and of course issues of infrastructure and unemployment, being high. So the value addition of sending children to school in this kind of environment becomes a dialogue that parents do have. But certainly every parent has a responsibility and government also has a responsibility. Mm-hmm. The quality, the extent to which this right is enjoyed is what we hold in dialogue.
Okay, we're already over time.
She never answered my question.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
That's how we'll wrap up. Is to answer Edith's question.
The government in action. You mentioned about whether it is institutional. Yeah, there are institutional issues. The institution of security or military has to an extent, been unable to respond to the Boko Haram insurgency and to also bring back these girls. Reports indicate so many reasons, including their capacity and capability in terms of ammunition, arms, and the right kind of armament to confront. We've also got another reason, which is political will. In the beginning, the abductions were denied or were kept in silence until 15 days when the Bring Back Our Girls raised the decibel of the incidents and said silence is not an option. Almost 300 children missing, we cannot keep quiet. So there was denial in the beginning, and even when it became obvious that, yes, a fact-finding mission was set up by government, it came back with a report that 216 girls were still missing. Even at that, the right political will, the right pressure to compel action by our government is still not yet yielded. In terms of citizens, because we must also bring in the context of citizens' contribution to the rescue. Citizens expect communications, to improve between government and citizens, so that if there are things such as early warnings in terms of even events that could inform where these girls are, the communication between government agencies and citizens is weak, and so there is really little or no input from citizens in terms of the rescue operation. So there's also that as a gap.
Okay. We have to wrap up now, but again, thank you to everyone for coming. Our panelists will be available if you have individual questions. Thank you.